Greetings, friends of the Shepherd's Rod. Welcome to our presentation today, where we're going to remember Sister Bonnie Smith, a true Davidian pioneer and oral historian. This is a presentation of upa7.org. And why is this important? Why remember Sister Bonnie Smith? Well, there are three very good reasons. She was one of the few Davidians who lived on Old Mount Carmel who kept the faith her whole life. Most Davidians, under the tenure of Brother Houteff, lost their faith along the way, so she's unique in that way. She also preserved much valuable historical documentation regarding the rise and progress of the original Shepherd's Rod message, and we're going to share some of this with you. She also revealed a true Christian character by encouraging any newcomer into the message to study and remain faithful. And anybody who has known Sister Bonnie can testify this, of her great love for the message and her love for especially new converts into the message to keep their eyes focused on Jesus. So this is basically a summary. So we're going to break this down into a little more detail and cover some of the rich legacy of this unique individual. Also, another important thing is that portions of the old Symbolic Codes would not be available without copies that she preserved. I mean, she has portions of the old codes that are not available anywhere else in the world. So this is another significant thing. So we're going to look at each of these aspects in a little more detail. We'll begin with this thought for meditation. It actually comes from the old Symbolic Code, Volume 5, numbers 6 to 12, page 15. And this is actual part of the memorial service for a Davidian brother, Eugene Lipsey, who died at Old Mount Carmel, the second death at Old Mount Carmel. So the thought begins, again, we are reminded that the righteous perish, and no man layeth it to heart, and the merciful men are taken away, none considering that the righteous is taken away from the evil to come. We, as present truth believers, should realize that the evil day spoken of in this scripture is now 10 years nearer than when the truth concerning it was first made known to us. They shall rest in their beds, each one walking in his uprightness. If we are to meet them, we must be wide awake, lest we be found among those who make a wide mouth, drawing out the tongue, and whom the Lord shall reprove by his word, by the words, against whom do ye sport yourselves? Against whom make ye a wide mouth, and draw out the tongue? Are you not children of transgression, a seed of falsehood? So Sister Bonnie now rests in the grave. So the question for us that are alive and remaining is, are we going to be considered faithful to the end? Do we hope to meet the sister and other faithful Davidians that have gone to their rest in the grave? It's a serious thing to contemplate. So it's really an opportunity to search ourselves where we stand in regard to the message. Are we faithful? Here's another thought from Inspiration Council's Writers Editors, page 28, paragraph 1, talking about how Ellen White was encouraging the early workers in the Advent movement to speak. And she says the following: God has given me light regarding our periodicals. What is it? He has said that the dead are to speak. How? Their work shall follow them. We are to repeat the words of the pioneers in our work, who knew what it cost to search for the truth as for hidden treasure, and who labored to lay the foundation of our work. They move forward step by step under the influence of the Spirit of God. One by one, these pioneers are passing away. The word given me is, let that which these men have written in the past be reproduced. In the signs of the times, let not the articles be long or the print fine. Do not try to crowd everything into one number of the paper. Let the print be good, and let the earnest living experiences be put in the paper. So here she's encouraging the pioneers of the Seventh-day Adventist Church to write down their testimonies and put them in print. And we have the blessing today to benefit from those who had those experiences establishing the work, and how much more for the pioneers of the original Shepherd's Rod. And today, with the passing of Sister Bonnie, literally there's hardly any left that still kept the faith. So preserving her testimony is very important. So that's part of our object today in this presentation. Sister Bonnie did not leave behind a memoir or a written work, but she left behind a rich oral history, and that's been well documented. So I hope you appreciate today. We're going to share some of her legacy. Begin by a little bit about her experience. She moved to Old Mount Carmel in 1936 with her family, and here's a photograph of the Smith family sitting on what they call the brink, or it's an overlook of the Lake Waco, and this is in 1938, 2 years after they moved there. So it's her father, A.G. Smith, her mother, her older sister Betty, older brother Clifton, then Bonnie, a younger sister Rosalie, and then her youngest brother Grubbs. So that's the Smith family that moved there in 1936, and Sister Bonnie literally grew up there. So she has a rich experience of life at Old Mount Carmel, and that's one of the legacies that's so important. An interesting side note, her younger sister Rosalie actually married Don Adair, Don Adair's first wife. You may not have known that, but if those of us that knew Sister Bonnie, she would share a lot of stories and experiences about individuals. So yeah, that was Don Adair's first wife. That marriage didn't go well. But so yeah, there's a lot of intertwining amongst Davidian groups. It's a small family, if you will. Here's some other photographs of her family. That's her mother and father, her older sister, and Bonnie is the little girl in the white cap sitting below on her mother's lap. And then here's a little interesting photograph. This was at her memorial service, dated January 13, 1941. My name is Bonnie Smith. I'm an errand girl for the Mount Carmel office and getting experience. So early on, the children at Old Mount Carmel were taught to be useful, and they were even employed and paid a small wage and taught how to do finances, how to return their tithes. And so Sister Bonnie here, this is a unique photograph, a rare picture of her in her youth as a useful young person at Old Mount Carmel. We also have photographs from her collection of the young people at Old Mount Carmel. Here's one of the children, and they were all very active. In this one photo on the left, Sister Bonnie is on the right-hand side of that photograph with her head cocked to the side. And if you look at other photos, here's the other photo, children with their garden tools. They were all put to work. They had their hats on and they worked in the sun. If you look carefully, Sister Bonnie there is close to the middle, standing up with, I think, the long ponytails. So yes, her stories, her experiences of the life at Old Mount Carmel as a child are archived and preserved, not only in terms of her oral testimony, but also photographic records. Here's another photograph, probably years later, the young women who were taught to work and labor and work in the handicrafts, the kitchen in particular. If you look carefully, Sister Bonnie's over on the photo on the left. She's not under the tree, but next to it, you can recognize her there. And one of her jobs at Old Mount Carmel was to work in the kitchen. She worked in the bake shop, and she was an expert cook. Anybody that spent time with Sister Bonnie could testify that she was a perfectionist when it came to preparing meals. And then the photo on the right here is a picture of the History Day, or the Day of Days at Old Mount Carmel, that was held in October of every year. And this was towards the end of the Brother Houteff's tenure. I think this is 1953-54. And if you look carefully, you can identify Sister Bonnie. There's one of the young ladies sitting down on the front row in the white dress. So yeah, she was part of the activities. So this is significant that she was there in the middle of it and knew all of the people. Anybody that talked with her when she's talking about these photos, she could probably identify everybody in here. And not only that, but what happened to them. So this is remarkable, part of her oral history. Well, as Sister Bonnie grew up, she became a beautiful young lady, as you can see on the photograph on the left, and attracted the attention of a Davidian Bible worker by the name of Sidney Smith, shown in the middle here. He was a hunter under Brother Houteff in the hunting campaign that started in 1954. And so they married and remained faithful. And here's a picture of them later in their years. They traveled extensively in witnessing for the Rod message, all through the 1960s, 70s, 80s, all the way up until the death. Brother Sidney died in 2002. He had a stroke, I think it was 1998. So the last few years of his life, he was not able to, he was bedridden. Sister Bonnie faithfully stood by his side and took care of him. But for years, they traveled all around the country. They stayed in places like, lived in places like Arizona. I think they stayed in Yucaipa, California for a while. They had a tenure down in Florida. And so in these areas, they actually had converts into the message, and many of those people are still alive and are converts into the message. So yeah, they had a rich experience sharing the message as a husband and wife couple. I remember Sister Bonnie telling stories that they would, for example, Brother Sidney's favorite study was the flood chart, which is interesting. Most people don't start with that. And I myself had never given a study on the flood chart, but Sister Bonnie said that Brother Sidney loved to introduce the rod through the flood chart. They also focused a lot of time trying to reach the leading men, the pastors and the conference presidents and so forth. And I remember one time Sister Bonnie telling me about that, and I said, well, Sister Bonnie, did you ever have any experience convincing them, any of them, that the rod was true? And she said, well, unfortunately, no. Most of them were trained to fight it. And she told the story of one, R.L. Odom. If you check his name, he was assigned to research and expose the fallacies of the rod, and he published an article in 1962 called "The Shepherd's Rod Disbands" after the debacles of Florence Houteff, and that was published in the Signs of the Times. And so I asked Sister Bonnie, what did you think of him? And he said, oh, that man knew nothing. He was just trained as a puppet, if you will, to go out and dig up dirt on the shepherd's rod, and and the failures of Florence Houteff and all her predictions, and then turn around and blame it on Brother Houteff. So he was obviously up to no good and much mischief. But Sister Bonnie and Brother Sidney interacted with those men and tried to give them the other side of the story, but to little avail. So it's unique that they did work together as faithful husband and wife for, like I say, for many decades until Brother Sidney died. Now, they spent many years here at Salem. Here's a collage of images of the Salem rest home over a span of time. On the far left, we have the rest home as right after it was first erected in the, I think this 1946 was the picture, and then directly across the street is the Davidian Seventh-day Adventist Church. And this is a unique story because this is one of two churches on record, Seventh-day Adventist churches, that the pastor, in this case Elder Nations, was convicted of the rod and brought it to the congregation, and the whole congregation accepted the rod. So this is remarkable. The other one is in Meadows of Dan, Virginia. But this one here in Salem remains to this day. But that church, the whole church was converted to the rod message, including the Smith family of Sam and Stella Smith, who had 14 children. I think the only one living left is Sister Helen Luce, the youngest of that family. So that's how the Salem Rest Home and Davidian Church looked in 1946. In the middle, we have a snapshot of the facilities in the 1970s, early 1970s. And this is significant because if you notice carefully, you can see a sign there. And we've documented this carefully, that the storehouse moved here in 1970 and published the original Shepherd's Rod literature. So there was the publishing work right in there. We have a video that documents and shows you inside pictures, but they published the original literature here. And that existed as a storehouse from 1970 and 1974 until there was a split. And many of them went back to Yucaipa because Don Adair took over. So there's a church there, or the chapel actually. It's really, it should be called a chapel. I remember once I brought that up. I said, well, you shouldn't call this a church. It should be a chapel. And some of them got rather offended. But this is the original Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I said, yeah, but the same town, the Laodicea built another church because this one they could not. They tried to take it over. They tried to take the deed from it. There's a whole story behind that. Someday maybe I'll tell you about how the locals and God intervened to prevent the conference from taking over this church that converted to the shepherd's rod. That's a whole nother interesting story, but Sister Bonnie was part of that. And over on the right-hand side, we have a photograph there of I think this is around 2003. I lived in this area myself for a period of almost 3 years and got quite acquainted with the Sister Bonnie and Brother Sidney and Harold, Brother Howard and Helen Luce, Sister Faye Talley, part of the Smith family. Now, most of them have all passed, but I spent time fellowshipping here because I had been studying with Donna Deere and I got cast out. And so these brethren welcomed me in, and they were very kind and Christian and patient in helping me grow and develop in my faith in the Rod message and sharing also their testimonies and their experiences. And of course, there was the Davidian church/chapel as it appeared, like I say, in about 2003. So Bonnie and Sidney lived here, and after Brother Sidney died in 2002, Sister Bonnie lived in this rest home, if you will, all the way until her recent passing. So this is where she spent, and many people that had got to know or acquainted with Sister Bonnie, this is where they would meet her. Shallowford Road, Salem, South Carolina. It's a unique place in Davidian history. And here's a picture. I spent a lot of time collaborating with Sister Bonnie, and this is significant because as we began our work to restore the original Shepherd's Rod message and started upa7.org, this is the process. It started really around 2005 when we saw the lack of literature in the Philippines and the failure of the Mount Dale Association to have any interest at all to see the literature published there. This began our journey to restore the original literature and make a means available that we could publish it anywhere in the world. And so in this process of traveling and locating original literature and historical documents, Salem was an important place. So I spent a lot of time with Sister Bonnie, and this is one of her favorite places is out on the outside porch of the rest home with the family cat there, probably peeling beans or preparing food. This was in the fall, and we had a lot of enjoyable time. And as I traveled and discovered historical documents, I would come and say, "Hey, Sister Bonnie, have you seen this document?" She goes, "No, where did you get that?" I said, "Oh, I found it at the GC archives, or I found it here at Andrews University." And she says, oh, can I have a copy? And I said, "Oh, sure, no problem. As many as you like." And Sister Bonnie loved to make copies and then share it with other people, her friends. So this is, I think, the nature of our relation. She was very open and giving, willing to share with anybody. And I very much enjoyed that interaction, is she would share with anybody that wanted to know the important information, the historical documents that she had. And we're going to look at those in a minute here. But in turn, I was impressed in this collaboration to share any documentation that I discovered. And I found that it was unique. Nobody else had seen it that came out of the GC archives, for example. So Sister Bonnie was very excited to receive that, and we had a great time together, visiting many times in the years from 2005 up until well into, I think 2015 is about the last time. Another note about this picture, you noticed on the right-hand side, you see that trailer. This is the infamous trailer that Bonnie and Sidney lived in for many, many years. They traveled back and forth across the country. They were in Mount Dale, Florida. Of course, the last place is Salem here. And I remember helping move that trailer. They were staying at another location in Salem and moving it over here to the rest home. And the inside was neat as a pin. It had the books and everything. So that was their mobile sanctuary, if you will, as they traveled around witnessing the rod. And old trailer from the 50s, very well built. It's probably still sitting there. I wonder if anybody will ever, what will ever happen to that. But that was a special thing, a cherished object that her and Sidney used to live in for many, many years. Now, I bring up this photo, the Cup Executive Council 1975. This is significant. In the years following the death of Brother Houteff, up until 75, during the 60s, Bonnie and Sidney really didn't have any association with the headquarters of the association that existed in Vista, California under Brother Warden. Now, they knew the Wardens very well, but Bonnie and Sidney really didn't have any active role in leadership or publishing during the 60s. However, things changed. In 1975, there was a split. The headquarters had been, or the publishing work had been at Salem from 70 to 74, but there was a split, disagreement, because Donna Dare usurped, took over, and began to introduce various doctrines in the Symbolic Code, the unauthorized code, that other Davidians opposed. And so this led to a split. We've all documented this in prior videos. You can check a link in the description box below. But these other Davidians, there were 12 of them, signed a letter, we have copies of it, that they split with Salem and Donna Dare and reorganized under the original charter, 1961 charter, back in Yucaipa. And Sidney was part of this executive council, and you look in this photograph on the left, that's Brother Sidney. And so they then become actively engaged in the organized work at Yucaipa. And this is significant because next to Brother Sidney is Harold Bloom, and then next to him and the woman in the back row is Wanda Bloom. And then on the far right is Erwin Reichman. And those three led to a split in the Yucaipa in 1983 because Wanda Bloom wanted to remodel the literature and do her own thing. And we have this all carefully documented. She changed the cover artwork of the Timely Greetings. She radically changed the charts. And so we've all documented it in the video we have called Remodeling the Shepherd's Rod. And so that origin, that split, was because they wanted to tamper with the original. And there were Davidians that said, oh no. So all of that history and that testimony Sister Bonnie shared with me, and we're thankful for that. And I have documentation to support that as well. But so Sister Bonnie also was the archivist of history, what we call more contemporary history, after the death of Brother Houteff, and helped us piece together the puzzles to trace the lineage or the true storehouse that God used to preserve the original literature. So Brother Sidney and Sister Bonnie were part of that as well. So this is a significant part of her testimony as well. Now, the biggest legacy for Sister Bonnie, I think the most significant that we should not fail to acknowledge and make an import is her preserving important historical documents. And foremost is the old Symbolic Codes. And here's some samples, Volume 2, Numbers 3 and 4, and then some of the latter issues, Volume 7, Volume 8, and Volume 9, with these remarkable artwork. Well, Sister Bonnie is the only person on the entire earth that preserved the entire set of the original old codes, from Volume 1, Number 1, to Volume 10, Number 2. It is true that there are portions of these codes in other locations. There's a few copies at La Sierra University, Adventist University. Dudley Goff has a copy of a few of these, but nobody had a complete set, especially volumes 1 and 2, except for Sister Bonnie. And we're so thankful to God in this collaboration that we were able to digitally archive this and preserve these and now make them available so that anybody in the world can print these. And this cannot be understated, the significance of this, that God put in her mind to preserve that. Without that, we wouldn't have these treasures. Now, it is interesting, as a side story, if you will, of the effect of these old codes. As we trace the lineage of the storehouses, Yucaipa, of course, there was a group that got kicked out of Salem in the early 1980s and became the foundation of the Mountaindale group, led by Anthony Hibbert and others. They got kicked out of Salem. Well, when they tried to reorganize, all they had was a couple set of charts. They had no literature, but they trusted that God would provide for them. Well, later they found out and discovered this group of older Davidians printing literature out at Yucaipa. And they traveled, they sent 3 representatives, they met with them in 1985, and then they agreed to have a joint session. I think it was around 1985 or 86. And they merged, and we document this in another video, where 2 Davidian groups merged. And the important thing was Yucaipa brought with them the ability to print the original literature, which Mountaindale inherited and kept alive for about 20 years. Along with that, where Sister Bonnie had these historical documents, the old codes, and the Mountaindale brother did not know about this. So when this was made known, that they discovered this, they got so excited to go over this treasure trove of history. It is interesting, though, it did lead to a rebellion. Certain of those people took the old codes and grabbed a few statements and says, oh, came up with the brainchild that, oh, we got to go relocate back to Old Mount Carmel. And of course, this is a big controversy about location of headquarters. And of course, the person that led that rebellion was none other than Norman Archer and a group of followers that eventually split and reorganized or started Waco in 1991. So they split from Mountaindale. And the source of it was their discovery of the old codes. Now, we've carefully documented what those statements are and asked the question, is that instruction or authorization to relocate back to Waco? And the answer is no. We've carefully broken that down, but nonetheless, this was the cause of a major split amongst Davidians back in that era in the early 90s. And so you can't blame the new codes. You have to put the fault solely on the individual that misinterpreted the statements that were applicable back in the 1930s and not to the 1990s. But that's a whole nother story. But so it is interesting how historical documents can lead to trouble. Not because of the documents, but because of the people that are looking for a position, and that's what Norman Archer was. And it's interesting, in talking with Sister Bonnie, she knew Norman Archer quite well, and I won't say a whole lot, but she did not think very favorably of him, especially his role in the printing work back at Yucaipa. He did a lot of things that caused a reproach. And so Sister Bonnie wasn't shy to share her experiences and interactions with people we know now today to be basically prophets of Baal, frauds. She knew M.J. Bingham very well, and she told things about M.J. Bingham that shocked a lot of Davidians. I won't go into that here. And she also shared testimony about her interactions with Norman Archer and exposing him for what he is, a fraud. So Sister Bonnie did open up. She was not a gossiper. She did not character attack people, but when it was necessary, she did tell the truth about who's who, and by their fruit you will know them. So that's one important legacy, significant, the preservation of the old codes. But thank God for Sister Bonnie that we have the digital archives of this that now can be reproduced anywhere in the world. If you'd like information on how to do that, please contact us. We'll help you out. Another thing that she had preserved was the original 1944 Rod study charts. Her husband, Sidney, had a set, and she personally colorized them. She was instructed under Brother Houteff on the coloring schemes, and she reiterates that story in great detail, how Brother Houteff was emphatic on the specificity of the colors. And we've documented on prior videos. You can check a link in the description box below. Why it's so important to preserve those colors. Colors have meaning. And so when you look at the original charts compared to charts, or what we call counterfeit or unauthorized charts have been published by other groups like Waco and Mountaindale and so forth, you will see a change in colors. Dramatic changes. And these are proof that they are not original. The originals are here, and this is a side-by-side showing two examples, the 11th hour chart and the prophetic worlds, the beast chart as we sometimes call it. The original that belonged to Brother Sidney, and you can see they were faded, they had stains, they were printed on English linen and very susceptible to moisture damage, so you can see stains and watermarks. And we were able to digitally preserve those, get a wide format scan, and then through the miracle of modern technology, Photoshop, digitally restore those into this pristine state, leaving out no detail but taking out all the artifacts. And of course, we've made these available since the year 2010. So that is another legacy of preserving those charts. Now, there are other copies of charts. We've located them in other locations. There was a set in the Davidian church across the street. A brother there had a set under his bed he had unearthed after decades, and we were able to put together between those sets restore the original 18 set of charts. So this is also another important part of Sister Bonnie's legacy. Is thanks to her we have the original charts preserved and archived and available in small size or large charts. If you're interested in a copy, please contact us and we'll be able to. We print these not only in the U.S. but also in South Africa. And finally, the preservation of Old Mount Carmel in photographs. And these have been on the internet for a while. There was a certain Sister Dara Dietz and her husband Michael who had the vision. They were part of Mountaindale back in the 1990s and had the vision to take the Rod message and put it on the internet. And remarkably, the executive council in Mountaindale, oh no, they were more worried about Y2K and black helicopters and all of that. And so they poo-pooed the idea. And that didn't stop Sister Dara. She went ahead and pioneered getting the Rod message onto the internet. And having known Sister Bonnie and seen these amazing photographs, these are unique archival photographs, she digitized them and put them on the website. And it's ironic that once she did that, everybody else came, monkey see, monkey do. Oh, show us how to do that. Archer and Waco, and everybody wanted to copycat Dara Dietz. So that's where these photographs, these archival photographs of Sister Bonnie, she loved the photographs, first showed up on the internet. So you got pictures of like the pioneers when they first gathered there, when they traveled there in 1935 under that tree. These are infamous photographs, pictures of the building where they were built. A lot of these buildings no longer exist. And of course the individuals, the iconic photograph of Brother Houteff, who didn't like to be photographed, but they did get his picture. And of course other pioneers, the first ordained minister under Brother Houteff, Harry Warden, who was instrumental in preserving the original Rod after the death of Brother Houteff during the 60s and 70s, all the way up until Ukaipa. So these photographs are priceless. And by the grace of God, we're able to digitize those. And so this photo history is also available in the hands of professed believers. So this, once again, is one of the unique contributions of Sister Bonnie, is preserving this photo history of Old Mount Carmel and the life of Old Mount Carmel. Which brings us up to something that you all haven't heard before. We did a series of interviews with Sister Bonnie in 2010. And I worked in collaboration with another brother. And this is inside that Davidian chapel. And what we did is we said, let's let Sister Bonnie tell the story. Let's put the photos up and let her tell the story. And this format is unique. We've never released these. We've had these archived. And I want to show you this little clip here, just this brief, about a minute and a half, of behind the scenes, how this worked. So I'll play this here.
What we had. And, but mostly, this is where the nurses stayed up here. And then, if the nurses wanted to be near the patients, and there was a kitchen in there too, and where we could serve the old people, and some of those old people were so precious that I could just tell you all kinds of stories from. But and then way over here on the end of the old folks' home was a cannery where we canned our peaches and figs. We had big orchards. Two peach orchards, big peach orchards, and they had string beans. So we had all people, girls who would go and do and corn and whatever there was to put up that we didn't use. So this was a lawn from here.
Well, thank you.
I got off track a little bit with when Brother Howard gave out their graduation in July of 48. What happened there.
Well, that's actually, that could be kind of cut out and put it in a little.
place.
Oh, absolutely. So.
Okay, so you see a little clip here behind the scenes, what was going on. What we did is we just put up photo after photo of Sister Bonnie and let her talk. And it's just absolutely amazing, her memory recall. And so this is a special treat. We're going to now, for the first time, make all of this available in a series of videos of Sister Bonnie describing, you're going to see the photograph of behind the scenes, identifying the people and the situation behind this. And so this is a remarkable thing that we have archived and never found the time to do it, but we think now is the appropriate time to let Sister Bonnie's story be preserved and told, her oral history. So this is her legacy. So we'll be very happy. So I recommend highly you subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so that when we release these videos, you can check them out for yourself. This is a rich historical legacy that we have thanks to Sister Bonnie. And this is, like I said, this is a bit dated. This is, 13 years ago. And so I think this will be the benefit, all of us, for those of you especially that didn't have an opportunity to get to know Sister Bonnie and hear these stories. So look forward to this. So how do we conclude our study or our presentation today? Well, Sister Bonnie Smith was a true Davidian pioneer who grew up in Mount Carmel and maintained her faith in the Shepherd's Rod message until her death. This is rare because many of the people at Mount Carmel lost their way. And Sister Bonnie told story after story, people that got discouraged or lost their faith or got caught up with Florence Houteff and walked away from the message. But Sister Bonnie was, like I say, an exception to the rule. God granted her a sharp memory, which provided us with a rich history of life at Mount Carmel under the direction of Brother Houteff, not only in terms of photograph, but also the oral discussion. And so those interviews, we're going to see them blended together in a unique way. It's never been done before. So Sister Bonnie preserved many documents that are not available elsewhere, including photographs, original study charts, and complete set of the old Symbolic Codes. Fortunately, by the grace of God, all these materials have been digitally archived and made available on the websites under upa7.org. Sister Bonnie's oral history describing the people and significant events that took place at Mount Carmel have been preserved at Baylor University. She traveled there and was interviewed along with Brother Sidney and Glenn Green. But those people don't really understand the message or have the interest. So this series of interviews from 2010 will soon be disclosed, and I think you'll be impressed. You'll be surprised the perspective, because we have a deeper interest in these things. So it'll be from an inside perspective, and I think you'll be able to glean nuggets of truth that you won't hear in the Baylor interview series. So I hope you're all looking forward to that. We really look forward to getting it available for all of you to examine. So we thank you for your time. This concludes our presentation. If you have any further questions, comments on this presentation, then please subscribe to this YouTube channel, Universal Publishing, for future updates. Check the link in the description box below for videos related to issues about that I mentioned, about the old codes and so forth, and the preservation of the charts. And if you'd like any assistance how to establish original publishing, Shepherd's Rod Publishing House in your area, then please feel free to contact us anytime. Here's our email, phone. You can text us or contact us on WhatsApp through that phone number, or visit our website, one of our websites, yparish.org, where not only can we help you set up the publishing work, but we can share with you this rich historical legacy that's been bequeathed to us through the ministry of Sister Bonnie Smith. And we're so thankful to God for that. We're thankful for your time, and may God richly bless your search for truth as for hidden treasure. Godspeed.